Pese al crecimiento del mercado de las criptomonedas y el espacio DeFi, existe todavía mucho valor que puede ser agregado para ayudar a la continua adopción de la tecnología blockchain. El día de hoy nos acompaña Siddarth Patil, co-fundador y COO de Comdex, una solución Layer 1 dentro del ecosistema de Cosmos que busca conectar instrumentos del mercado tradicional con el mundo cripto para democratizar estos mismos y dar más opciones de inversión a los criptonautas. Hello, everyone. Thank you once more for tuning into Criptomonedas.do. Thank you for making us part of your week to start off the week with energy and interesting information and relevant information about what's happening from impactful people in the cryptoverse. So this week we have a really special guest. He's the co-founder and COO at Comdex. Comdex, for those of you who don't know, is a layer 1 infrastructure solution for Cosmos, which aims at connecting the commodities trade markets to the ecosystem using an assortment of connections through blockchain structures to allow the liquidity of central finance applications to flow back and forth from and to the DeFi space. By using blockchain technology, this allows the global supply chains to democratize and expand their reach, as well as provide investors with the opportunity to diversify their portfolios using native tools for and of the Cosmos ecosystem. We had the pleasure of talking to this gentleman at Cosmoverse 2022. For those of you who haven't checked it out, go to our YouTube channel. You can check this small recording we did to just talk a little bit about what Comdex is. But he's really excited for the possibilities and probabilities and the future of the Latin American market. And we talked a little bit about it in Cryptoverse, like I said. So it's my pleasure to introduce Siddarth Patil. Sid, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Really excited for the discussion today.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about, briefly about yourself, about Comdex, about what you thought about the Cosmoverse experience and just the overall energy of collaboration and just good vibes in general, right? That we had in Medellin.
Yeah, this was my first Cosmoverse and first time in Medellin as well. So it was really awesome to see how beautiful Medellin is, and then also meet all of Cosmos, especially so many people that I kind of only knew digitally that I finally got to meet in real life. So great experience, definitely good memories.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be one of those experiences that none of us will forget. And it was amazing how dramatic the change was from year number 1 to year number 2. It was like 1,500 of us in the conference and just like exchanging good information, having great chats, having a couple of beers, afterwards and just having an overall good time. I think that was the most amazing thing about the conference. And Sid, just to start, I would like to first and foremost ask you to share a little bit about who you are with our community. Like, who is Sid Patil?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Sid, one of the co-founders of Comdex. Prior to working with Comdex, I was coming from a background in traditional finance. I'd worked in wealth management and investment banking, and around 2017 is where I kind of got introduced to the blockchain ecosystem. I got introduced to Bitcoin. I saw the prices of Bitcoin kind of going up, and that was kind of the initial reason why I got very interested in what's going on in this space. I also had a few friends who were, themselves trading and, involved in different ways in the crypto ecosystem. So I learned a lot through them. In around 2018 is, when I got in touch with a few folks to kind of really get to the depth of how blockchain can actually deliver some value in the real world as it is. So that's how I kind of, arrived into the right setting where I met some folks from the commodities industry and kind of understood what value blockchain can add into the commodities industry. And that's kind of how Comdex was born. And in terms of getting introduced to Cosmos as well happened around the same time, because a lot of the people I met in India, they were all themselves kind of exploring different ideas, different concepts and ecosystems. And proof of stake was something that we always had kind of an affinity towards, and we were always researching what the best way to implement proof of stake would be. And at the time, Tendermint kind of was the gold standard for proof of stake. And that's kind of how we made our inroads towards Cosmos and been in Cosmos ever since.
That's awesome. Why did you think that Cosmos was the best way to go just to launch Comdex?
A couple of reasons, as I said, proof of we had the vision of kind of being a proof of stake based chain. So
Yep.
at the time in 2018, 2019, when we started doing a lot of the research around it, we stumbled into Tendermint, we stumbled into Cosmos SDK, and it sort of seemed like the best way forward in terms of implementing it for us. Also in terms of the product itself that we had planned to be built out. Uh, when we talk about the commodities that we spoke about, we what we were doing essentially with that product was digitizing those commodity assets in the real world and storing them on chain as NFTs. And the way to do that is capture the documents that signify the ownership of those assets in the real world and store them
Mhm.
as NFTs on the chain. So what we realized is that in order to create this solution and also to scale it up, it would be a lot more feasible to do that with the kind of tech stack that Cosmos SDK offers. So it just naturally kind of logically made sense from various different directions when we thought about it to do a Cosmos based implementation. And yeah, and I mean, since then we've kind of over time been working on the Cosmos SDK for some time, and now kind of you can say built some sort of affinity and like expertise in it, where we now kind of want to continue growing and building in Cosmos.
That's amazing. So I remember the first time I heard about Comdex and just this concept that you're describing about storing this data as an NFT on chain for people that are not as, experienced or don't really understand what this means. That was really a major breakthrough when I first heard about it. It was like, wow, that's incredible because obviously there's tons of benefits of connecting these different, like not just blockchain ecosystems but financial ecosystems. Like you said, you came from a traditional financial background, and I imagine that it's completely different, like for the most part, of how the blockchain architecture really operates. And it's really fascinating. Like I said, I read a bunch about Comdex. The whole team has read a lot about Comdex. But can you, like, you've told people a little bit about what Comdex is, but can you elaborate a little bit about what exactly Comdex is and what is it that you're trying to achieve with the project?
Sure. So, Comdex, it's a blockchain. It's a DeFi infrastructure layer for the Cosmos ecosystem. It currently houses, several solutions that we're building out on top of the chain. The enterprise trade app, as I spoke about, is designed to digitize the commodity space industry. The vision with that product is, as I said, the commodities industry, the way it operates at present, is quite fragmented, quite
Yeah.
distributed, and at the same time very inefficient due to a lot of various trust related factors. And the way the industry kind of mitigates these problems of trust is by involving a bunch of intermediaries, and each intermediary comes with a cost and comes with their own sort of time that it takes to process their part of the role. So as a result, every kind of commodity transaction becomes a very long affair where multiple parties and multiple stakeholders get involved. They each have their own cut to take out of the deal, and also, contribute by probably doing some sort of verification process. All of which can efficiently be solved when blockchains come into play, because blockchains
Hmm.
create like a trustless environment for such activities to take place. And that was
Absolutely.
kind of the starting point of our vision of building Comdex. Um, Obviously, when we built out the enterprise app, we always knew that just having these NFTs on chain wasn't enough of a solution. We had to kind of reinforce that with having payment settlements built into the app, having financing modules built into the app. And the way to achieve that would be to have a chain which is having all the primitives of financial transactions as well as DeFi transactions built in as modules on the chain, so that,
Yes.
I mean, based on the commodity use case, someone could spin up an application that supports payments on commodities, but tomorrow the use case can be beyond commodities as well. The global supply chain is massive. So the vision now with Comdex is at the chain level, it's a blockchain built with modules that focus on some of the core primitives of DeFi and traditional finance, and allow creation of applications that can work sort of interoperably and composably to offer solutions that complement one another.
Absolutely. I think that is fundamental at this time. Like, just, going back to a year ago when IBC was first introduced and how it allowed different chains to operate with it, like one with another. And I remember, when the prices of coins were going up to the roof and just the general market cap of the entire market was just going up and up and up. And we almost hit like $3 trillion. And it's interesting because a lot of the times for us that we're just in the crypto space, for us, it's like, wow, that's amazing. It's $3 trillion in liquidity. That is so much. that's a lot of value. But what people fail to understand is just the value of the overall market, like commodities, real estate, derivatives, all those different things. Like, really, that's where most of the liquidity, or where all the liquidity in the world is, really, right? So in what way do you feel IBC finally helped Comdex and just the overall architecture of the Cosmos ecosystem expand into different areas? And why do you think IBC is important for creating solutions, as you say, for onboarding people to maybe like more traditional investment mechanisms within the DeFi space and vice versa?
So I think, majority of the answer of that can kind of be summarized into one word, being interoperability. And to kind of expand
Yes.
on that, IBC is all about interoperability of blockchains. How that has benefited us in terms of, our vision of what we really want to deliver. Obviously, there's bridging within the crypto ecosystem, being able to move assets from Osmosis to Juno to Comdex and around the entire ecosystem. But if you kind of, as you said a little earlier on, majority of the liquidity in the world is currently parked in real world assets and traditional finance assets. Commodities itself is like a $17 trillion industry on an annual
Yes.
basis in terms of how much volumes move through commodities. So how would the crypto ecosystem kind of expand beyond where it is today is to start integrating into traditional finance, into CFI, and offer what it has as a value offering on the kind of decentralized side, also on the centralized side of things. Because if you look at any particular industry, whether it's the supply chain of commodities, supply chain of merchant goods, or whatever it is, there are several inefficiencies that still exist. There's several manual processes that still exist, and all of them still exist for the reason of mitigating risk that comes from counterparties, and which is essentially, if you boil it down, it's a trust problem. So trustlessness is what blockchains do, but what IBC does is connect these blockchains. And that's
Yes.
kind of very key to being the ultimate bridge between the decentralized world and the centralized world. And I firmly believe that in terms of kind of the long term, um, where we're headed long term in terms of DeFi, or just the decentralized realm of whatever we do inside of crypto, all of us, we're actually just building solutions that are meant to solve problems that we kind of
Yes.
perceive in our day to day or in our business lives. So that bridging is going to become important again, because as and more legacy systems adopt to newer tech, something fundamentally robust like a blockchain connected by IBC would definitely be a game changer when the adoption and kind of the openness to adoption of technology increases.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's the biggest thing right now is just that, just adoption of all these different technologies. And I love that you're talking about this aspect of trust. All this trust has been fragmented over years and years. I don't want to get like too evangelical or anything, but it's just a factor, right? That it's been around for a couple of years, and at the end of the day, the blockchain technology came to solve all those little issues for people to like regain some sense of trust in whatever form of a system. At the end of the day, blockchain is a system. It's an architecture of different programs and solutions. Like you're saying, it's just about creating solutions for everyday problems. And what Comdex is trying to achieve, and what blockchain in general is trying to achieve, like I said it in the intro, is just democratizing everything so that people actually have a say as to what happens to it, to their assets, and how they can really benefit from these assets. Because this trust aspect being fragmented so much, it's really, led a lot of people to become completely you know, to reject any form of systems or structures or whatever. But if we're going to move forward in the DeFi space, we definitely need these sorts of solutions to bridge all this liquidity from centralized finance providers and things like that, because that's really the way in which the ecosystem is going to evolve. The more liquidity is sucked into DeFi, the more it's going to become democratic, the more say we're going to have as asset holders and investors. And it's just really good to see these bridges being built. Can you explain to people a little bit about other benefits besides what you've already stated about building these bridges between centralized finances and decentralized finances? Like, mainly you said right now you're focusing on the commodities market, but the reach of Comdex is going to be much larger. The reach of the industry is going to be much larger. But what are other benefits that this is going to bring to investors?
Um, Primarily from the perspective of investors, it's kind of opening up or democratizing access to finance
Yes.
itself at a broad scale. A quick example would be, today I'm from India originally. So if I'm sitting in India and I want to, expose or take exposure in, let's say, American equities, or, companies like Tesla or in Netflix or whatever, there's actually no real way I can start investing in these companies. I would have to set up a bank account in America, be a tax-paying person in America, have a whole bunch of KYC and whatnot,
Hmm.
just to be able to access them to begin with. And that's just talking about equities. If we talk about complex financial products like derivatives or, swap, default swaps, or anything of that sort, I wouldn't even if I had the knowledge for it, I wouldn't be able to access it, because there's requirements like being an accredited investor or
Yes.
being licensed to do certain things. So there's so many different kind of barriers between myself and the product I want to access in the kind of realm that we exist in today. So how does one kind of circumvent this? And the decentralized side of things truly solves this for anyone. I mean, today, you have multiple products and protocols that are building out, perpetuals, futures, options. And if I am someone who has knowledge in these things and has the risk appetite to take exposure to these things, there's nothing stopping me from doing that in the decentralized realm. As long as I know what
Exactly.
I'm doing and I have the resources to do what I do, I can definitely access any of these products. So that's a huge thing for investors, is that it's now giving you access to a broad range of asset classes. Traditionally you had exposure to the asset classes that you're jurisdictionally kind of bound by based on where you live, but now it's kind of like opening up the entire financial spectrum, to anyone who wants to access it, and just making it permissionless, if you will, where it doesn't matter who I am, as long as I'm able to access these things with the resources I have.
Absolutely. This point raises 2 points in my head. So the first one is when we were at Cosmoverse, we were talking to the Omniflix team, and they were talking about the similarities between Indian culture and Latin American culture. And it's interesting because these similarities go beyond the fact of, sharing traditions or sharing, different like cultural things. But this point that you're highlighting about, if you don't have the accredited investor status, or if you don't have a specific, you know, amount of capital, you really don't have access to any of these instruments. And I really don't think that people have truly wrapped their head around what projects like Comdex are going to do. Because anyone that has opened a brokerage account or something, like, they've understood the limitations that they have to have access to these markets. And another thing I wanted to ask you is, how was it for you coming from the centralized finance world? Like, how was that moment when you realized just the potential of the reach that this technology could have? Like, how was that for you?
I think it was very interesting for me because when I think about my time that I spent in traditional finance, I took a lot of information for what it was, just
Yeah.
consuming it without kind of questioning it, taking
Yeah.
things for what they were. But coming into the decentralized side of things has, kind of opened up that part of my mind where I was able to question certain things and try to get to the bottom of why things are the way they are. So
Yes.
sometimes I kind of, when I think about my own learning of finance and decentralized finance, I feel like I've probably learned more about traditional finance through decentralized finance
Absolutely.
than the other way around.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, what was eye opening for me as well, because if you look at something like derivatives, when I learned about derivatives
Yeah.
in the traditional finance times, I just took it for what it is. When I kind of got down to actually figuring out how they're built, what is the, kind of constraints that you can come across, what are some challenges you need to look after, that's when I got a full understanding of what goes into making derivatives happen. And now that I understand it, the decentralized realm allows me to access it directly. Like, there's nothing stopping me from accessing derivatives on the blockchain.
That's so
Whereas even
powerful.
if, yep, and even if I spent all that time trying to understand derivatives the same way, I don't think in the traditional finance world I would have had the same kind of access. So that's, I think, something very powerful about this whole space.
Absolutely. And so you're talking about this, this way in which you learn more about a lot of centralized finance aspects by becoming involved in decentralized finances. And it's funny to ask this, but what are the benefits of really diversifying a portfolio? You already talked about what Condex is trying to do, and just giving all these different asset classes and give people access to them without having to, have huge lumps of money to start becoming an investor in all these different areas of the market. But what are the benefits of really having a diversified portfolio? Because obviously in the crypto space, a lot of people say, like, oh no, bonds are broken, stocks are broken, uh, any sort of other investment that is not crypto is broken. And I really think that when we really radicalize in this way, we lose subjectivity a lot of times, because it doesn't mean that it's completely rotten or there are not good financial opportunities in traditional financial markets. But like you said, when we add the blockchain layer on it, it democratizes it. So what is really the benefit of diversifying, despite the fact that crypto has been the best performing asset in the last 10 years?
So this is, I think, a very good question and something very relevant in kind of the macro times that we are in right now.
Yes.
So if you look at, kind of where crypto started, in many ways, I look at it as a hedge against the traditional finance system, where it was started to be kind of the antithesis to traditional finance. But over time, we've seen so much, institutional capital flow into crypto now that I kind of see that there's a correlation that is formed between how crypto markets are moving along with how traditional markets are moving.
Totally.
So in that scenario, when you add to it the fact that in the last 2 years, the Fed has been printing dollars like crazy. I think something like 25% of all circulating
Yeah.
dollars were printed in the space of 1 year and between 2020 and 2021, which is actually mind-boggling to think about.
Absolutely.
Uh, if you look at even the European Central Bank, quantitative easing was something that was going on for a long time. And it was kind of like building up to this impending doom of inflation,
Yeah,
which we're kind of
absolutely.
now living in right now. So question for investors in such times is, if I hold US dollar, my US dollar inflates at 8 to 9% a year. If I hold equities, everything is going down. If I hold crypto, crypto is down on average 90% from all-time high. Where do I really go
Yeah.
to protect my capital? And that's where I think diversification is key. So if you quickly think about commodities as an asset type, which is kind of another interesting aspect of why I got drawn towards commodities. Commodities, if you look at certain commodities like gold or certain agri commodities and look at the way the prices performed over long duration, surpassing, let's say, 20 to 30 years, you'll see that there's a significant robustness to the way it kind of continues going up.
Totally.
That is fundamentally down to the fact that commodities are tangible and they just have inherent value. uh, People are not going to stop eating. Construction is not going to stop. Metals are going to be required. Agricultural commodities will be required. So we can always kind of look at commodities as assets that will kind of have some degree of inflation resistance in the long term. But that being said, today if I find out that coffee is a great commodity to own, I'm not going to stock up coffee in every corner of my
Exactly. I'm not
house.
going to have a silo full of coffee, right, in my
Coffee,
backyard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a challenge. Like if I fundamentally know coffee is a great investment, where do I go to actually do it? There's no accessible instruments that allow me to do that. And that's where I think what we're kind of working on in the long run is designed to solve, is that you can have exposure to coffee as an asset without physically owning that coffee in your house and or in a warehouse and paying for, I don't know, the warehouse rent, paying for insurance on that cargo, paying for making sure there's no infection or anything that happens in that place where it's stored. So with access to these things physically comes several different aspects and headaches that one needs to take on before they can kind of truly benefit from taking exposure. But something like synthetic coffee on the blockchain will just allow me to use my USDC or CMST or any other stablecoin I have, just purchase it, buy, hold, and then sell when it goes higher. So that is essentially now allowing me to diversify my portfolio of investments beyond just digital assets and equities into physical assets, which I know are inherently valuable because the world kind of demands them today. So I think that's going to be again something very powerful when the ecosystem is kind of ready to unlock that aspect of diversifying your portfolio into real assets which are synthetically represented on chain.
Absolutely. When you're talking about this, I remember that I listened to this interview a couple of months ago about this guy. His name is Felix Zulauf. He's the manager of a hedge fund in Switzerland. And he was precisely talking about this fact of, in times like this, with inflation like going through the roof, really what asset classes can people put their money into? And then I listened to another interview a couple of days ago from Charlie Munger from Berkshire Hathaway, and he highlights this exact same point, right? So he's saying right now it's about betting on what's going to lose the least in current market conditions. And like you said, commodities, I remember like when the pandemic was just starting and when it really got like started to get bad in senses of like supply chains completely becoming disrupted and commodities prices were going berserk. Like I remember lumber prices, at least here in Mexico, shot up like 250%. And what else? I remember
Nickel went up, I think.
nickel
Yeah.
went up like incredibly. So this aspect that you're saying about giving people tools to get into these sorts of investment, because for people that are not in the commodities markets, like they have no idea sometimes how complicated it is to get like indexes for commodities, like how complex mechanisms they are, and really how much capital you need to allocate for those specific positions to like eventually be successful or whatever. But this aspect of what you're saying, that commodities are going to keep increasing in price because the you know rotations of the world are not going to stop, building processes are not going to stop. We're going to need all these tools, and just you democratizing everything with Comdex, it's amazing. And like I said, I don't think really people understand how impactful this is going to be, and I understand that that's why Comdex was the first, uh, that commodities were your first focus. Like I understand that now. Can you share with people a little bit about if Comdex is working with other sorts of markets, or right now you're just going to focus on commodities?
In fact, I think right now we've kind of shifted focus more into the DeFi realm for some time now.
Got it.
Again, kind of the products that we're building in the DeFi side, they serve their purposes for what they do in the DeFi side of things, but they're
Yeah.
ultimately all designed to complement the commodities industry solution that we built out.
Yeah.
So presently, we have a stablecoin protocol on the Comdex chain called Harbor Protocol, which is for the composite stablecoin, which is an over collateralized stablecoin. We have Komodo, which is a lending borrowing application, and CSwap, which is a DEX. So together, the three of them, you can think of them as a decentralized money market, or a base layer for a decentralized money market in Cosmos. Obviously, users can collateralize whatever assets they hold, IBC assets like Atom, Osmo, Juno, mint something like a stablecoin out of it, and then deploy that stablecoin as liquidity on a DEX or liquidity in the lending borrowing protocol and start generating yield. So this forms like a base layer of DeFi for Cosmos, if you think about it. But what it also does is creates a composable environment where users are able to kind of create their own strategies within that, where you can have leverage exposure on staked assets, leverage exposure to your LP positions. All of that can kind of be created when these three apps work in tandem. This decentralized money market is designed to kind of become the liquidity hub or a DeFi hub for Cosmos in many ways, which, when it builds up sufficient liquidity, can start serving its purposes of complementing the commodities industry, whether it's in the form of financing or if it's in the form of payment settlement by stablecoin, all of which would significantly improve the user experience, even on the commodities side, more than what they are doing today with whatever systems they're using today.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, this is going to create the base layer for the Cosmos ecosystem. And another thing that I would like to highlight from just the Cosmoverse conference is just the overall spirit of collaboration in between all these different projects, and just listening to all you guys, speaking about your projects, and just obviously as a cosmonaut, your mind starts expanding of all the possibilities that exist with different projects focusing on different aspects of how you're saying is just creating solutions for traditional problems. So I really do think that uh, before the interview, we're talking about that right now, the Cosmos ecosystem is really generating a lot of traction that wasn't being generated before, or maybe it was, but it was only with a small demographic of people that have been following the projects. And, like maybe they were present for the launch of Osmosis and IBC implementations. Like you said, you first started considering Tendermint as the best solution for a proof of stake chain and all those things. But I really do think that we're like just getting started as to how big the Cosmos ecosystem can really be. And this interoperability, like you're saying, it's going to be key, for connecting all these different projects within the Cosmos ecosystem and then outside of it. So I think we can expect great things from Comdex and from other projects. If you would like to add anything else about Comdex.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I spoke a bit about the decentralized kind of money market vision that we have at Comdex, and
Yep.
how that's kind of going to bring DeFi to Cosmos. But something I spoke about at Cosmoverse, which I kind of feel like is the next stage of thinking that as a whole ecosystem need to get into when it comes to DeFi, is how to make DeFi kind of sustainable and long run
Totally.
useful for people.
Yes.
And again, one of the things I think that we are focusing on at Comdex going forward for some time is now recognition of yield generating assets or yield bearing assets and using them as collateral. So what I mean
Yes.
by that is, two classic examples are staked assets, where you have something like Atom. Obviously, if you hold, like if I hold Atom today, I can stake it and get close to 19% staking APY from staking my Atom. But if I was to collateralize my Atom at a 200% collateralization ratio, then get CMST out of it and lend it out in the markets, I know for a fact that the lending yield out, or whatever DeFi yield I can generate from my stablecoin position, would probably not be as high as the staking APY that Atom offers. And I would say so is the case for majority of the chains in the Cosmos ecosystem now. So staking, having to choose between staking and DeFi is kind of locking liquidity away from DeFi ecosystems into the staked ecosystems for Cosmos. But if DeFi is to truly flourish from here on, there has to be a solution to get these staked assets and unlock liquidity against them, which I think is a big theme in the Atom 2.0 white paper as well, which has recently
Yes.
come out. So one of the things that we're working on is, working closely with liquid staking protocols in Cosmos right now to integrate staked assets as collateral, so that you can have, as I said, leveraged exposure on staked assets, where you have Atom, you stake it, you get ST Atom, or STK Atom, which
Hmm.
you collateralize to mint CMST, which you can then use to buy more Atom, and then create like a loop which keeps
Yep.
leveraging your position there. Similarly, we're also going to be working closely with dexes, including Osmosis, Crescent, and other dexes in the ecosystem, to start recognizing or creating some sort of pricing mechanism for LP shares or LP tokens from these dexes. Because when you provide liquidity in the DEX, you're obviously generating an LP yield against the liquidity you provide, but that LP token itself is fundamentally a yield bearing asset again.
Hmm.
So the ability to, again, use that LP token as a collateral somewhere, mint CMST, use that CMST to provide more liquidity, allows you to create like a leveraged LP exposure on a pool as well. So these are some things that, that we as a team are excited about at Comdex, and this is kind of the next year of our focus as soon as we push live with our products right now. So I think the message here is that we'll be having a lot of more discussions around this publicly as a team. We'll have Twitter Spaces, we'll have discussions on the forum and the community chat. So would really encourage anyone who's listening who has opinions on this or has thoughts on this to actually contribute, because I think this discussion not only benefits Comdex, but kind of benefits the DeFi ecosystem as a whole, because these are questions we're all faced by. And
Absolutely.
this would be, I mean, personally, I'm just very excited by this subject to kind of dig into it more and work on it.
Absolutely. So, people, you already heard that follow Comdex. You already shared your social media handles on our previous interview, but how can people get involved? So, you already said like spaces. You can have all other public discussions, but how can people get really like connected with Comdex, with you, with the team, with everything that you guys are doing?
Um, I think the best way to connect with us is either Twitter or Telegram right now, because I think that's where most of the activity is happening. So to find us on Twitter, it's at Comdex official, and on Telegram, it's I think it's Comdex chat official. I'm not able to remember, but the link would be in the description, and it's easy to navigate to the community chat once you're either on our website or on Telegram. So the website is comdex.one, comdex.one. Yeah, if you make your way to the community chat or to Twitter, and you tag any of us and ask us questions, there'll always be someone or the other from the team ready to kind of help you out and answer. And then we have weekly Twitter Spaces as well every Thursday that we conduct, where we kind of try to share some updates about what we're doing, and occasionally from time to time invite other builders from the Cosmos ecosystem to come share what they are building and how they can collaborate with Comdex potentially. So that's another great place to have to get in touch directly with us and any other builders in Cosmos.
That's awesome. We're gonna make people understand that that's how they can get connected with you. And Sid, we've covered amazing things. I would just like to wrap the interview up with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for them?
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome. Awesome. So, which was the first coin you owned and why?
Ethereum,
Yeah.
and because my friend told me to buy it.
Okay. That's awesome. Do you remember where you bought it? Like which exchange you use?
uh, it was, I think it's one of those exchanges that don't exist anymore. It
Yeah.
was it was an Indian exchange called ZebPay or ZebiPay or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, most of them are all gone. So, Sid, what's your favorite beer?
Oh, Kingfisher. It's an Indian beer called Kingfisher Premium. It's
I've
it's
heard about it.
yeah, it's a controversial opinion, but I think it's my favorite beer.
Awesome. And then Sid, what's your favorite hobby besides working at Comdex?
Oh, I'm actually a big fan of watching sports. I especially
Okay.
love football or soccer, and
Okay.
I'm also a big fantasy soccer player. So these are like my hobbies outside of crypto. I really love watching soccer and getting involved in like fantasy soccer.
That's awesome. You have another reason to come down to Mexico. You know that here Mexicans were pretty much like soccer maniacs.
Oh
Kidoki.
yeah.
So Sid, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is a book called New Ideas from Dead Economists. It's a book I think
Wow.
I've read 3 times. It's a fantastic book, very well written.
Okay, I'm gonna definitely check it out. And then Sid, if you could choose between flying and being invincible, which one would you choose and why?
By invincible, do you mean like combat invincible?
Yeah, like
Like,
Superman. Like, bullets can do nothing to you and like you can just walk through fire.
I think I'd fly. I don't think I'm
Okay.
too confrontational as a person,
Yeah.
so I'd benefit more from flying.
That's awesome. And then just to wrap it up, Sid, what do you think the prices of Bitcoin and Cosmos will be 2 years from today?
Ooh, tough question. 2 years from today, hopefully everything is up. Can't really
Hopefully.
put a number, but fingers crossed. Bitcoin 1 million, Atom also 1 million.
Let's go. Let's do it. Yeah, let's hope that
Up
that happens.
only.
Up only. Exactly. Well, Sid, this has been an amazing conversation. I really want to thank you and tell you that I really appreciate the work that you and your team are doing at Comdex. It was a pleasure having you in the program again. We were really looking forward to recording a full interview with you. And just, you already said people how they can connect with you and everything. And once again, thank you so much for supporting the Latin American community. And we look forward to hearing more from Comdex and maybe doing some other collaborations in the future.
For sure. Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you so much, Sid. Take care.